Hi everybody. In this presentation, I'll try to talk about my reflections on what I have learned in this course and how I can connect it to my area of expertise. Motivation and engagement have always been my research interests. So when I try to come up with a chapter proposal for the um, forthcoming second volume of Universal Access Through Inclusive Instructional Design book, my chapter title would be Universal Design for Engaging English Language Learners, and probably it will go to section 2 of Inclusive Classroom Design and Instructional Strategies book. I think that there are a lot of educators amongst us who are ESL certified. So I try to tailor this presentation to the needs of ESL learners. So you can consider some points that I highlight into your teaching to English language learners in your classes. So I want to start with this strong statement from Rao and Torres. They highlighted the fact that English language learners have varying needs other than their language needs, and they emphasize that there is significant variability amongst English language learners in relation to their individual backgrounds and experiences. So considering this variety may be life-saving for ESL learners. Here I'd like to share an infographic that I prepared for teachers who have ELLs in their classrooms. And I can share this in the discussion board if you like, so you can download if you want. Basically, there are three groups of ELLs in the US schools. The first group is new arrivals who had prior schooling experience from 0 to 5 years in their own countries. And so their needs are a lot different from group 3. They have a lot in common with group 2, and I here summarize what their needs might be. The second group of students are students with or with no or limited or interrupted formal education. So at least 2 years of interruption they have experienced. Mm, they might have no prior school experience due to wars, poverty, economic issues, or political issues, and they might be very smart but might not be adapting fast since schooling is new to them. So their needs are more academic. The second group of students, this group of students with limited or interrupted education, they usually suffer from a trauma. So their needs are slightly different from group 1, 2. They need more emotional support. And group 3, they are long-term language learners. They may be born in the United States, or they may have been living in the United States for a long time, but their home language is not English. That's why they are called English language learner. However, this group is a lot different from the other two groups since they actually know English. So a common mistake made by educators is that they set the same expectation for all these three groups, though their um, needs are completely different from each. So maybe the students who have just arrived in the United States had very good school experience. They are accustomed to being successful, but unfortunately, they might be treated as students who have learning disabilities sometimes. So maybe their only need is time and support to learn the language. So if we cannot identify their needs, we cannot design our teaching according to UDL principles. So for those who have ELLs in their classes, should be identifying their needs and providing necessary accommodations so that these students would be more motivated and engaged in learning. So the scope of English language learners is too broad. So in this presentation, I'll try to focus on fostering the motivation and engagement of ELLs through the UDL principles. According to the engagement principle, culture, neurology, personal relevance, and background knowledge are main factors influencing individual variety. So what does this mean in the ELL context? A well-known and widely accepted theory in language teaching is the affective filter hypothesis. There is a filter in our brains which functions when learning languages, and it is low when the learning environment is a low anxiety and engaging environment. And when the filter is up, it impedes language acquisition. So at this point, we may ask, how can we provide this filter be down for our language learners? 2 points are important here. The first one is identifying and recognizing the needs of our language learners and avoid overgeneralizations about them. And the second is providing choices and applying multiple ways of engagement principle to foster their motivation, foster the motivation of English language learners. So in some chapters of our course book, there are very successful examples to how UDL principles can be applied to meet the needs of language learners. Fostering affective networks, providing multiple means of engagement can help develop motivated language learners whose affective filter is down and ready to learn what we are teaching to them. So I'd like to attract your attention to some examples of engaging English language learners from the book Universal Access Through Inclusive Instructional Design. You may remember from Dr. Rayner's presentation from Ireland. She mentioned that the student teachers that she was teaching usually stress out that there are too many checkpoints of UDL and they cannot improve their teaching in all these areas. She mentioned that she mentioned what she advised them to do, and she said them to start small and to implement whatever they can in their own situation. I think this is very important, and nobody can achieve all at once if the learning environments are not the ideal and the perfect ones. And as from my experience, I know that it doesn't exist anywhere in the world. I mean, the ideal and perfect learning environment doesn't exist anywhere in the world. So getting a clear picture of how the quality of teaching to English language learners can be improved through UDL, we can look at the we can look at 3 chapters from the book Universal Access Through Inclusive Instructional Design book. Our first example to applying UDL principles to increase motivation and engagement of English language learners is from section 3 and chapter 16 of the book, which is Science for All through UDL. And this is a good example to checkpoint 9.3, self-regulation. The principle is promoting expectations that optimize motivation of ELLs. Setting same or similar expectations can be sometimes overwhelming. However, if we set too low level expectations or not age appropriate expectations, that can be demotivating too. So, as indicated in this chapter, such an attitude can even hamper ELL's progress in STEM in the long run, which is very dangerous, I think. So, an application is introduced here in this chapter, which can help teachers who are teaching STEM and have English language learners in their classes, which is called the Crack the Book series. And this application can be a practical resource for STEM teachers who have English language learners in their classes to set appropriate expectations and promote their, optimize their motivation. Another good example is from chapter 12, balancing requirements, options, and choice in UDL. This is a good example to fostering collaboration and community for English language learners. This is checkpoint 8.3, sustaining effort and persistence category. And checkpoint 8.3 puts emphasis on sustaining effort and persistence by fostering collaboration and community. And the teacher mentioned in chapter 12, labeled in English, labeled some terminology in English and other languages spoken by the students in her class. And she places English speakers and English learners in cooperative learning pairs with a blank map of the world while teaching geography of continents. And this is a very good example to foster collaboration in classes. So my last example is from section 2, chapter 6, the global UDL virtual classroom. In this chapter, sustaining effort and persistence. In that category, checkpoint 8.2 is highlighted, and this is a good example to varying resources for language learners, the importance of varying resources for English language learners. Um, varying resources and demands optimizes challenge, and otherwise the English language learners may lose their motivation or may not get motivated at all. So these are just some examples. In different contexts, different environments, different needs may exist. So what we must do is to identify those needs and improve the quality of our teaching, applying whatever checkpoint or checkpoints we can apply in our conditions, in our specific environments, so that we can reach our goal of developing expert learners, expert English language learners who are highly motivated and know how to learn.